in Ghana. I was in Ghana. There was a conference there from July the 14th to the 17th, 2023, organized by the government of Ghana, and then with the support of Open Society. And that conference was a major milestone, like in the history of reparations. What is happening is that there are some initiatives taken by some countries, individual countries, supported by other countries, and endorsed by the African Union. So Ghana is the champion of the caution of reparations in the African Union. And then even though it is the African Union project, Togo took the initiative of the Non-Pan-African Congress, and it became, because it was endorsed by the African Union, it became an African Union project. And then South Africa, which launched the Agenda 2063, when one of the South African daughter, Dr. Dlamini Zuma, when she was the chairperson of the Commission of the African Union, under her leadership, the African Union adopted what they call the Agenda 2063, which talks about the Africa that we want, and which wants to put emphasis on the political, economic unity of Africa by the year 2063. And then, as Teresa likes to talk about, the UN decade that is going to end, the African Union adopted the decade of the African roots in the African diaspora, which is also an initiative of Togo. South Africa is going to launch another campaign, which is going to be the second decade of the Agenda 2063. So these are the things that are happening with the African Union. And then it is important for me to share with you the context in which things are happening. In the case of Ghana, so I was fortunate to be one of the hundreds of people invited by the government of Ghana to discuss about building a united front for reparations. So for 3 days or so, we had several panels, maybe 8 or 9 of them. And it was there was panels, but at the same time, like plenaries, because everyone who was a participant was to be in a room when people were discussing some particular topics. So, and then we did that. And so the opening ceremony was magnificent. And then people came from different parts of the world. I think there was the Prime Minister of Burundi. There was the Prime Minister of Togo. There was the Minister of War and Veterans of Algeria. There was a minister from Kenya, and then the Minister of Justice of South Africa, and some other dignitaries. And then all of them, they spoke during the opening ceremony. And there is an Afro-European of parents from Ghana. Her name is Belle Ribeiro. She's a member of the British Parliament, and she's, I think, a member of the Labour Party. Then she was one of the speakers during the opening ceremony, and she delivered like a wonderful speech. The president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, also explained the rationale for reparation, saying that if the Jewish people got reparation and the Japanese and some different groups in the world, the people of African descent, they too deserve reparation. So that was the opening ceremony. The right after, there was, I think, the first panel, and then I spoke the following day on the 15th in the morning. Among the people who were there, there was Dr. Ron Daniels, who is the president of the Institute for Black of the Institute of the Black World in the 21st century, a great advocate for Haiti, and also a great advocate for reparations. And then he has been with his group, he has done some consistent work that even took him, I think I remember, to the Vatican to try and meet the Pope, people close to the Pope. So Dr. Ron Daniels were there, and some other African Americans, like there was another, the Professor Cheryl Grills. I know she's involved in the struggle for reparation in California, and some other names. If I remember, then I will share those names. CARICOM was represented. CARICOM is the Caribbean community. It's a regional grouping that brings together, I think, more than 12 or 13 countries in the Caribbean. And as you know, since 2013, CARICOM established a commission for reparation, which is led by Dr. Hilary Beckles. Unfortunately, Dr. Beckles was not there, but there were some other prominent members of the CARICOM community. I am thinking about Dr. Chenzira Davis, who is the chairperson of the Association of the Caribbean Scholars. There was also Dr. Dr. Hilary Brown, who is like a heavyweight when it comes to the issue of reparation. There was also the Ambassador David Commission. He was there among the attendees and the participants, and many other names. People coming from Toronto. There was one lady called Brenda Foreman, and many other people here and there. That was on the side of the Caribbeans. I have already mentioned the Afro-European Belle Ribeiro was there at the opening ceremony, but she left. And then there is another guy called Robin Walker, who wrote like maybe 600 or 700 page book. And when the title is When We Rule the World, he was there, and I think he's an aide. He works with Belle Ribeiro. On the side of Africa, there were some Africans. When I say African, talk about continental Africans, some from Ghana, and then I was one of the people coming from the United States, and Brian Kagoro from Zimbabwe was there, and then he gave like a wonderful speech. Now, and then there is a gentleman in charge of the diaspora in Ghana called Kwesi Ababio. So I gave you all those elements for you to see that people discard the conversations and they discuss the issue of reparation from different perspectives, from the legal perspective, from the humanitarian perspective, from the judicial perspective, from the political perspective. The idea is to build a united front in order to launch like the global movement for reparations, as it is an issue that is gaining momentum in different circles of the world. One thing that was very important that I wanted people to know is this. When the Caribbean were talking, they were talking about how they contributed, to raise the awareness about reparations in the context of the Caribbean community. But at the same time, the impression was given that, they did more sustained work than the Africans. And then the Americans, of course, we talk about how they struggled for reparation in the United States. And then as if, they had done more work than the Caribbeans. And then the Africans, they came and they said, you know what, we may not have done some sustained work about reparations, but you guys need to remember that in 1993, there was a major conference on reparation, I think in Abuja, in Nigeria. And there was another conference in 1999 in Ghana. So then my observation is that many of the people involved in the conversation about reparations, they have done great work, but it looks like everybody needed to do his or her homework so that there can be an harmonization of positions and also the sharing of information. And then when they were talking, my feeling, even though the first day during the inaugural ceremony, many people were talking about Kwame Nkrumah, and they did. talking about celebrating Nkrumah and some of the founding fathers of Africa, particularly Kwame Nkrumah, because we were in Ghana. But somehow, when the conversation started, many people were not linking Pan-Africanism to the conversation of reparations. This is how I came into the picture. In my presentation, I told them that I was there because I wanted to put emphasis on two very important elements: the centrality of Pan-Africanism in the conversation about reparations, and also the ethos through which we can claim reparations. And then that ethos, beside Pan-Africanism, is the Ubuntu philosophy. And I concluded by saying that we have to learn lessons from the 1958 All Africa People's Conference, which put into place a united front by establishing an organization called the All Africa People's Conference. And it was within those gatherings and this conversation that people fought, for the decolonization of Africa. As an example about the importance of Ubuntu in the conversation about reparations, I spoke about the Ubuntu corporate social responsibility as one of the campaigns that many people could put into place within or under the umbrella of a global universal movement for reparation in the world. And I can stop there. I think George was saying that I had 4 minutes, and then I can answer some other questions and then give you more details about some other elements. But if George can allow me, in 1 minute, I want to talk about the declarations that they call the proclamation. I can say that here, there was a disappointment at the end of the conference because the proclamation which was read did not reflect everything that was suggested. For instance, the idea I spoke about Pan-Africanism, there was no mention of Pan-African, no mention of Ubuntu, but there was also the idea that there needed to be like a tribunal that needed to be set up in order to deal with the issue of reparations. The person who was talking about, who was giving the conclusion about the conversation, did not mention that. So many people felt disappointed. Somehow the message was diluted. But even though the conference was a major milestone, as we could see Caribbeans, Afro-Europeans, Africans from the continent, and Black Americans coming together in a big gathering to discuss the issue of repression. Thank you very much for your, for your presence.
Well, thank you, Yanaka. When you spoke in your opening, you mentioned July as the month of the conference, but I thought it was more recent than that.
No, maybe I'm sorry, I'm tired. You should have rectified. I'm tired. I was in Ghana in November.
November.
If I said July, is a mistake. I'm sorry. It's November 14 to November 17, 2023. Okay. Thank you very much, Teresa.
Yeah, great. I'm glad that we corrected that. So we're at the Q&A point. And so, but before we go to the Q&A point, I think we have some guests here who are not actually members of WIL. This UN Decade Reparations Working Group is a working group of the Advancing Human Rights Issue Committee, and we're part of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which, by the way, has quite a few sections in Africa. I believe about 18 sections in Africa. So Fabrice Levy, there's a gentleman whose picture is there. Is this a friend of yours?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, maybe he could introduce himself.
Yeah, Fabrice.
Okay, my name is Fabrice Levy. I'm from Ivory Coast, living in Canada for more than 10 years. And I'm part of one community who call CPP. And I got invited by my mentor, Dr. Nyanka, on this communication.
Well, I am so glad you're here because George and I meet with CPP monthly as members here in the United States. So I'm glad to get to meet you. Are there any other persons who are guests in the meeting today who are not actually members of WIL?
My name is Lydia Curtis, and I was invited by Lucy Murphy.
Wonderful, Lydia. Will you please say what your organization is?
I'm the co-founder of Siddiqui Educational Safari. We seek to elevate, celebrate, and empower young people through the art, history, and culture of Africa.
And you're based in DC?
I'm based in DC.
Great. Well, we do have the DMV branch, so I'm sure Lucy will try to hook you up with our branch in DC. Now we have my longtime comrade and friend, Afia Mwangaza, who just joined the meeting. So Afia, famous human rights lawyer, and could you please introduce yourself and where you're based, Afia? Afia, can you hear me? Well, Afia lives in Greenville, South Carolina, and she and I both, as young women, were involved with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so we were students back in the day, in the 60s. And so we didn't meet until 2000, but we stayed connected over these years. And we want to open up for questions. And I see that Robin Lloyd had her hand up, but she appears to be on the phone.
Yeah, just a minute. I can't talk. Bye-bye.
So did you have a question, Robin?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I came in late, and so glad to be talking with Ganaka again, and because I've been meaning to call him about some projects we have in mind here in Burlington. And he mentioned, he mentioned the need to harmonize between the US Caribbean and Africa, and the ethos from which we can learn lessons. You gave 2 points, and I was trying to write it down and I wasn't able to get it. If you could just repeat those. Hi, Ganaka.
Well, the
Yes,
meeting.
yes, I can do that. But Robin, I will suggest that we take some other questions, maybe 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah, and the meeting is recorded, Robin. So
Okay, that'll
we
be
can
good.
do it later. So we want to call on Lydia, and I see Alan is unmuted in case he has a question. So let's go with Lydia.
Okay, so this question is for Naka or for anyone that's present. I have a question about the UN proceedings that happened in May, the end of May. I thought that the whole idea of having the permanent forum, creating a permanent forum and having the 3 sessions or more, depending on what's necessary, is to so that we would not have to deal with having a decade or have something as unpermanent as a decade. But there was a large contingent, a majority of the people who were at the permanent forum were advocating and demanding that the decade be extended for another 10 years. And I didn't understand that because I thought the forum was supposed to replace the decade. So if someone could explain that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, we lost Sophia, who I think was possibly at that meeting since she travels to the UN meetings often, but I don't know the answer to that. Inaka, to you, I've been hearing the rumors about extending the decade because not enough has been accomplished. But as you can see, Yanaka is talking about the importance of self-determination of African peoples, which is what's happening now based on the conference in Africa and what we know is going on in the Caribbean and in Brazil and certainly across the United States. So I don't think we need to necessarily depend on the UN for direction. The fight for reparations has been going on way long before the UN declared the decade. So did you have anything to add to the UN question, Yanaka?
Okay, so can we take it one, Lydia? Because we have not responded to Robin's questions. So, you know, it will be unfair that I respond now your question, you know, while Robin is waiting. So if maybe we can take a third person question and then I'm going to try and answer.
Well, Alan, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. This is very interesting to hear from the African perspective, limited as I have been, and to see Pan-African, that is in terms of the United States, it's not just a local problem of our town or country, it is all of the United States, like it is all of Africa that is involved in this. Though comparing the two situations, Africa is dealing more with decolonization and some external power that has created the wealth imbalance. In the United States, it's more the class division. And how do you see actually define reparations in terms of wealth terms and in terms of access and democracy and equality of rights? And the United States, besides the wealth question, which is very difficult and mainly put at the federal level, which would be like the Pan-African or Imperial World Bank level, I don't know. But how to reform the various institutions of education and law and medicine and so on that have been deformed by the consequence of discrimination and slavery. So that's how much is the money part, how much is an institutional part? Thank you.
It was intended to be a 30-second question. I'm sorry you missed that in the beginning, but we're pretty much out of time for this portion of our meeting. So Yanaka, if you could take 5 minutes based on your choice of responding to the 3 questions together, that would be great. We have a hard stop at 3 o'clock. So would you please respond, Yanaka?
No problem. I'm going to start with Robin's questions. Before she came, I was saying that during the conversation in Ghana, I have noticed, and then even not because I've noticed, but I usually people who talk about reparation, they don't link the conversation of reparation to Pan-Africanism. So I said that I was there in order to reinforce the idea that the reparations need to be linked to the conversation about Pan-Africanism. And then the issue of reparation could be one unifying factor among many in the context of the new dispensation of Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. The second one is the Ubuntu philosophy. We need that idea of humanness, that around which we can build an understanding of reparations. People, the Europeans, should not see reparations as a punitive mechanism, but as something that can be redemptive for the community as a whole, be the descendants of former slaves, or the descendants of former slave masters, or descendants of the white community. So that's why I have proposed the Ubuntu philosophy. And Benny, after I spoke, they echoed what I spoke about, and then people spoke about several other cultural concepts, that we can draw from the African civilization in order to think about reparation. So that is something I can tell you that with humility, that was not a conversation being held up by many greatest advocates of reparations. The second element that Lydia spoke about, I will not say that, I think Teresa gave already a good answer. Certainly, those who want the decade of people of African descent to be continued, certainly that they think it can be an opportunity to continue to raise the awareness about the issue of people of African descent. So I respect that. For me, anything that can be done to raise the awareness about the issue, the condition of people of African descent, I don't have any problem with that. But like Teresa said, I am more in favor of a process of self-determination of African people of African descent with the support of non-blacks, whites, or Indian or Asians who can support the struggle as it has always been. And in that case, when we see what happened in Ghana, the same way Teresa and George brought me here, that is the same way Dr. Chenzula Davis, Ron Daniels, Hillary Brown, people are giving interviews wherever they can in order to maintain the momentum about reparations. And then as I'm concluding on this, in the context of the 9th Pan-African Congress, and then, we're working on, as I'm the chairman of that scientific committee. I am in South Africa. South Africa just concluded or just organized the first of the series of regional preparatory conferences. It was about science and technology and Pan-Africanism. The next one is supposed to take place in Brazil, in Salvador de Bahia, from February 26 to February 27. And I have proposed the topic of reparations in order to keep the momentum and to continue the conversation. And the theme is remembrance, restitution, restoration, and then reconstruction. So that we can continue the conversation about reparation. And this is what I will say about, I don't know if there's any question. Yes, Alan Harper spoke about Pan-Africanism and then the European American imperialism. Yes, I agree. And then for Teresa, give me 2 minutes on that. I'm going to take 2 minutes because, sometimes when people talk about reparation, people think that, it is the right for people African descent to have reparation. I agree. This is what I say, for all the systems that we endured. Number two, we have to go beyond the mere rationale for reparation to see reparation as a possibility to decolonize the international economic system. I think this is what Ellen was talking about. Because if we do reparation, it looks like it means that we are trying to talk about social and economic justice in the society. It means that we have somehow to go and counter these economic systems, mainly neoliberalism. And if we do reparation, it means that people are building a powerful movement in order to prevent a subsequent or other system of exploitation. So for me, reparation is not just about repairing damages and things caused to African people, African descent. It is the possibility to bring a new civilization on the face of Earth. That's why I'm linking reparation with the civilizational concept of the Ubuntu philosophy, with that worldview, which is about humanity, sharing, compassion, shared prosperity. We can build like a better world. So this is what I will say to answer like Alan's question about decolonization.
Beautiful, thank you.
Well, thank you, Yanaka. And in terms of the second part of our meeting, this is the UN Decade Reparations Working Group. And the reason we established it is because the UN Decade started January 1, 2015, and very little attention has been paid to the UN Decade, really, worldwide. And it's gaining some momentum in these last couple of years. And I just want to read what the United Nations says reparations is. Reparations is a process that has 5 steps, according to the United Nations: cessation, assurance, and guarantees of non-repetition. Number 2, restitution and repatriation. 3, compensation. 4, rehabilitation. And 5, satisfaction. Well, how do we get satisfaction? I think that is the self-determining a role for African peoples worldwide to say when the repair has been done and when we are satisfied based on that crime against humanity known as slavery, and we know the impact we're still feeling to this very day. Well, for our guests in the meeting, we have divided ourselves, so to speak, by our branches. And some of the branches in the United States section of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom have some strategic plans for how do we gain reparations in our cities or our states. And so I know that Alan has some things that he's working on, but I'll just begin by quickly saying in Georgia, I live in a place called Columbus, Georgia, which was founded in 1828. So the bicentennial is in 2028. So in essence, it's a 5-year plan from now until the bicentennial. And the goal is to go through the 3 election cycles, 2024, 2026, and 2028, to put pressure on the elected bodies in Columbus and who represent Columbus in the US Congress as well as in the state legislature to lift up the call for reparations so that we can see the repair being done over this period of time with a particular attention on housing because the housing crisis is deepening. So that's kind of how we're focusing in Columbus, Georgia. And I'm really struck by the strategic thinking coming out of the Africa section Congress saying 2063. Did I hear you say that year of 2063? Is that the year I heard you say in terms of what can be accomplished by then, Yanaka?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, thank you very much. If you allow me to talk about Agenda 2063, I'm going to provide the context for people who may not be familiar of Agenda 2063. In the history of Africa, even when Pan-Africanism went into hibernation because of the assassination and the killing and the elimination of African leaders from the 1958 to 1968, King died, assassinated, Malcolm assassinated, Nkrumah overthrown, Sylvanus Olympio overthrown or killed. So, so somehow people, Pan-Africanism became like it was not like a popular thing to to embrace. But the Organization of the African Unity, created in 1963, had the main goal of contributing to the decolonization of the continent of Africa, and then to the ending of apartheid and to the promotion of regional economic integration. In that context, there were a series of what are called continental plans. The first one was the Lagos Plan of Action 1980. The second one was the Treaty of Abuja 1991. The third one was NEPA 2003. And the fourth one is Agenda 2063. All of them are continental plans conceived, articulated by the African Union or by the Organization of the African Unity. So the Lagos Plan of Action, it was more about self-sufficient, self-reliance, how the African wanted to take in charge their own development. But the World Bank did not like it. 1 year of the Lagos Plan of Action, they issued another report done by Berg, they called that the Berg report, asking African countries to continue to embrace the law of comparative advantage in order to play a better role in the world economy. The second one, the Treaty of Abuja, it was about building like a domestic market, unifying African economy in 35 years. And it did not happen the way they wanted. and they came with NEPAD. It was the buzz about NEPAD, the New Economic Partnership of Africa's Development. But unfortunately for them, they did not resolve the issue of how to fund that the new the economic development programs, and particularly NEPAD embraced neoliberalism as they were talking about how to integrate Africa in the world economy. And now comes 2013 under the leadership of Dlamini Zuma, who was in the South African government. And then when she became the head of the African Union Commission, she brought that militant assertiveness, like in the conversation of the conception of plans. It clearly claimed Pan-Africanism. They want to do something about the Inga project, or about the Congo River, in order to electrify the continent. So they talk about even the decolonization of the independence of the Sahara Republic that Morocco is claiming. So that is the agenda 2063. It's a very important document that I'm urging all of you to go and read. And then now South Africa, the same thing with the UN Decade of People of African Descent. People have the feeling that in 10 years, they have not accomplished much. That's why South Africa is about, next year, is about to launch the second decade of the Agenda 2063, which means that they want Africa to be politically, economically, and culturally united by the year 2063. And then, so that is the most important idea that people need to know about the Agenda 2063.
Well, that's very important to know. And I just like to acknowledge that in addition to Yanaka, Fabrice, we have George's.
Lost your audio.
Had Toy Cool here a moment ago, so I'm glad so many members of the CPP are here. That's the Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress. And who is Shay Halu Lawson? There's someone here that a name I don't recognize, and I just like to acknowledge Shay Halu Lawson.
Teresa, could you arrange that the document that was referred to that he asked that we should all read? To get
is that no problem. If you go online, if I can find it, I can put that in the group chat. But if you go online, you put Agenda 2063, and then you can put PDF, and then you can have the PDF document. You can have the links. It's easy to find online. Agenda 2063. It's like the major plan that the Africans have comprehensive that they put together about the vision for the unity of Africa. The Africa that we want is one of the subtitles, and Africa Must Unite is one of the services that you will see when you are reading the documents. Yes, and also they claim clearly Pan-Africanism. So sometimes when I talk to some of my friends, people have the feeling that yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you, George. That's the document.
Yeah, so put it in the chat. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, George. So when we have the conversation about Pan-Africanism, people in the civil society or the activists, people in the streets, they have the feeling that they are the only ones, or they are the only constituencies, or the only stakeholders in Africa, to promote Pan-Africanism. And I keep telling them that it technically and historically is not true, because what we see today, that so many African countries leaders try to talk about more about Pan-Africanism. It did not start in 2023 or 2022. When the lady was in charge of the African Union, that militant assertiveness was like present in most of the talk of the leaders of the African Union. So I just wanted to rectify. Thank you very much for the question.
And we do want to hear from other places, since I spoke about Georgia. So Martha Peterson, could you introduce yourself and your question, please?
Yes, thank you. It's not a question. Thank you for this forum. I'm a guest. I was invited by Lydia Curtis of Siddiqui Safari, another member, and also I'm a member of BACC, but that's the African Cemetery Coalition, and I appreciate this forum, very informative. Africa Rising.
Africa Rising.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martha.
And so, George, could you say what's happening in the Southern Piedmont branch in the Charlotte area? And
Yeah,
then from
I'll be super brief. Samantha's on here too, but I don't know if she wants to add anything. Joyce Jenkins is someone we know through the Southern Piedmont Poor People's Campaign work. She's been involved. And we, Samantha and I, who are the chairs of the branch, were approached, mostly Samantha, to co-sponsor an event in February, which will be something that will help us launch doing work in Mecklenburg County and connecting statewide around reparations. And it's good that there'll be a second decade for people of African descent, because this is just a start. This is at Myers Park Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. It'll be in February. We, the Southern Piedmont Circle of the Poor People's Campaign, and we as WILF will be supporting this, tabling there, giving out information and talking to people.
Oh, thank you, George. That's a great flyer. Thank you. The case for reparations, we can certainly make it. So, Alan, do you want to say what's happening in Michigan? Can't hear you for some reason.
Yes, I will try and be brief. The objective is to put a resolution in front of the city by the end of the year, drawing on what are such perspectives of the UN decade and the engagement of the city of Ann Arbor and its county. The first event that we have is on Martin Luther King Day, doing again what we've done the last 2 years, is have a public assembly and an open mic, inviting people to express what is your dream in the voice, if they had, of the spirit of Dr. King. And to expect out of that will come from the people of our community the voice what is reparations and repair in this town. And all the relevant people have been invited, and maybe this will become an opportunity for something to get together that is otherwise very difficult. Ann Arbor is quite closed down in terms of intercommunal cooperation, largely because of the conflicts around Palestine and Israel and Zionism. So it's an interesting place. I have limited connections in some way. I've been here 87 years and everybody knows what I'm doing, except I'm a kind of a hot character. And so it's a bit of a dance, but I think it's coming together for Dr. King, whom I was blessed to meet, and I will carry on the instructions he left with me.
Well, thank you, Alan. And it's important to note that Ann Arbor is also the home of the University of Michigan. So it is a town gown situation as well. And so hopefully we'll be able to draw in some of the academic scholars around the university into the call, making the case for reparations. But I do want to find out who people are. I don't recognize who are in the meeting. Marcia Coleman, could you say who you are? Marcia Coleman, Adebayo.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry, I stepped away, so I apologize.
Could you just kind of briefly introduce yourself? Are you a member of WILF, or are you a guest at our meeting today?
No, I'm a member. I'm also a Lucy Murphy recruit.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And I'm president of the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. in Bethesda, Maryland. We are fighting to stop the developers and the county from desecrating a 16th century African burial ground. They recently found human remains in the cemetery of African girls who were sexually used during slavery to produce African labor for the South. They trafficked these bones almost 100 miles to a self-storage facility where they've been held now for 4 years. And so we are engaged in trying to get the county, Montgomery County, to release these remains back to the community. We're meeting a lot of resistance, but we're still fighting. So that's what we're involved in right now. And we're also going to present before the Maryland Supreme Court on January 8th to overturn a ruling from the appeals court. And everyone here is welcome to attend the oral arguments at the Maryland Supreme Court on January 8th.
Thank you, Marcia. Shay, hello, Lawson. Could you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, since you're a name I don't recognize?
Yeah, hi, hello. My name is Alphonse Lawson. Hello, I'm from Canada. I'm part of the CPP. I was invited by Professor Dr. Nyaka. I'm really interested in subjects related to Africa, uprising, Africa reparation, and a fight against all the domination system, neocolonialism, slavery, and all those systems that put Africa countries in kind of chain and domination and against African people to have their destiny in their hands. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I will learn from all the presentation. Thank you to Professor Nyaka and all the great speakers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This is our Africa meeting. It's a great way to end the year. So we have Eugene and Georges and Toya Kumo. So it's the CPP meeting, if I'm feeling like. So Georges, you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and then we'll let Toya Kumo introduce himself. Georges, are you free to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Teresa. I am George Duncan, originally from the Ivory Coast, and I'm here in Baltimore City. And I was invited by Dr. Nyaka, and this is a wonderful opportunity for me to learn further. Thank you.
Thank you. And Toy Kumo, my good friend, who comes and answers the call. So will you introduce yourself?
Yes. How's everyone doing?
We're doing good. It's a great meeting with all of my comrades from the CPP here. So introduce yourself, Toy Kumo.
Yeah, Toy Kumo Pete Sophia. I'm from so-called Nigeria. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So-called Nigeria, but I'm here in Washington, D.C. area. I've heard about reparations for the last 20 or so years. I've known about reparations movement from Dorothy Tillman in Chicago. I used to have a meeting with Dorothy Tillman in Chicago. I've always asked one question. When you talk about reparations, the first thing that comes to my mind is that this system is not going to give reparations. They're not ready to give reparations. We've been talking about reparations forever. They're still giving millions of dollars, billions of dollars away right now to what they call them, to the war in Israel. They're giving money, billions of dollars away to Israel, giving billions of dollars away to fighting in Russia. So they're not going to give any money to Africans or descendants of Africans. We have to take our own. We have to take it. We have to take it. You can't be begging your enemy for survival. You have to take it one way or the other. Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
and secondly, Africa. Let me finish. African people.
We can't allow you to do a speech, Toy Kumo, because we have a hard stop of this meeting, Toy Kumo.
We don't.
Takumo gets very excited, and he's not respecting the time, and so the administrator of our meeting will mute you because we do have a hard stop at 3. But I do want to thank the other members of Will, Joan and Samantha, who joined the meeting. And just one quick announcement. We'll have a lot to talk about in January when we start talking about the activities for 2024, which will include the UN Decade Reparations Tour of the Midwest with stops in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Chicago, Milwaukee, and Madison. And that will be in late May of 2024. So we try to meet once a month, and we don't have any more meetings of advancing human rights in December. So our January meeting of the UN Decade, I would propose that we try to meet on a Thursday again at the same time in the afternoon, and we'll choose the Thursday, whether it's the second Thursday or the third Thursday, but that's what we'll do. And we do have a hard stop at 3 o'clock, and I believe it's about 3 o'clock. And Samantha is putting in the chat, thank you. So George saves the recording, and we distribute it to all the members of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in approximately 30 branches around the United States. So they will get to hear all of your voices from this recording. And George also saves the chat with the important links in the chat. And I just want to thank George, who is the program committee chair of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And she's on the national board, and she supports our meetings of advancing human rights. And we're so glad that she does that. And Joan Goddard, who's from San Jose, California, is also a member of the national board. So we're glad that everyone was here today. And we thank you, and we'll see you on the next go round. Have a good afternoon.
So thank you very much, Teresa. Thanks, George, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So